I guess the really interesting thing in Robotron and Smash TV is you are confined to a single screen. And really in Robotron it was the easy thing to do with the technology at the time, and it turned out kind of interesting. In Smash TV we actually chose that, the dynamic there, because the cool thing of that dynamic is it's a confinement. It's a sense of being trapped and surrounded with no escape. And that was kind of the cool thing in Smash TV is you're sitting
seeing
there,
your whole world.
You see everything out there that you have to kill, and then they're just converging on you from all sides, and you just have this feeling of entrapment and this collapse upon you, and you have to somehow flee, work with the flow, somehow just blast your way through this mass and get out, and that dynamic, is really a lot of fun, and if you opened it up and allowed the game to scroll in any direction, if you allowed, a bigger play field, then it becomes, you kind of lose that dynamic because you can always just keep running. And here you must stand and fight, and it's the coolest thing is you think you're dead. I mean, there's so many times when you can take your hands off the controls. You go, oh man, I'm dead, and like you're not dead. You go, whoa, it's like you keep killing, keep fighting away, and like you somehow come out of it and you go, man, I
can't believe I survived.
How to survive,
that's the key to all these the successful games is that tight situations that you somehow escape from. Back in those days, if you'd finish a game, like the Atari VCS games, if you finished the game, well, you'd stop playing it. So
I guess the really interesting thing in Robotron and Smash TV is you are confined to a single screen. And really in Robotron it was the easy thing to do with the technology at the time, and it turned out kind of interesting. In Smash TV we actually chose that, the dynamic there, because the cool thing of that dynamic is it's a confinement. It's a sense of being trapped and surrounded with no escape. And that was kind of the cool thing in Smash TV is you're sitting
seeing
there,
your whole world.
You see everything out there that you have to kill, and then they're just converging on you from all sides, and you just have this feeling of entrapment and this collapse upon you, and you have to somehow flee, work with the flow, somehow just blast your way through this mass and get out, and that dynamic, is really a lot of fun, and if you opened it up and allowed the game to scroll in any direction, if you allowed, a bigger play field, then it becomes, you kind of lose that dynamic because you can always just keep running. And here you must stand and fight, and it's the coolest thing is you think you're dead. I mean, there's so many times when you can take your hands off the controls. You go, oh man, I'm dead, and like you're not dead. You go, whoa, it's like you keep killing, keep fighting away, and like you somehow come out of it and you go, man, I
can't believe I survived.
How to survive,
that's the key to all these the successful games is that tight situations that you somehow escape from. Back in those days, if you'd finish a game, like the Atari VCS games, if you finished the game, well, you'd stop playing it. So, I think it's important to always put in some dramatic finale that's very difficult to attain. And so, we put the keys out there, and unfortunately what would happen is people got so good at the game, they'd go through and they'd clear out the waves more quickly than we had anticipated. So the random icons that come out, and one of them is a random key, the key would come out, it wouldn't come out as often because they were so good at the game. So they would get all the way through the game, not have enough keys to get into the pleasure domes, have to go back and do it again.
If you look at the Robotron and the Smash TV style of games, if you look at the amount of enemies that you deal with on a per second basis, how many kills per second, I don't think it's ever been exceeded or even come close to by any other game.
Right.
The amount of
Carnage.
action,
Yeah, the amount
pure
of carnage,
and
yeah.
action that
Yeah.
that you have to deal with, and it's amazing how you really have to have this mindset of, you kind of have this global strategy of, don't get too near the wall, don't
Right.
get trapped in the corner.
Right.
But then you always have to have this free, you have to be always kind of free in your mind to kind of take what the game gives you. You can't have like a predetermined course and say, okay, I'm going to go over here and
It's
get
different
this.
every time.
Yeah.
It's different
Yeah.
every time. Things appear randomly.
Yeah.
I remember complaining to the sound guy, the sound person on the game, that I couldn't hear, this guy exploding over in the corner, Mutoid Man, or not Mutoid Man, Mr. Shrapnel.
Yeah.
And he like threw up his arms. He said, are you crazy? You're throwing off 30 explosions a second. It's like, how do you expect to hear Mr. Shrapnel explode when, you're shooting 10 bullets a second and there's all these explosions happening and there's gunfire, bah, 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 and, he's right. I mean, you sit back and you listen to the game, it's like, wow, it is nonstop explosions. The first boss monster we did for Smash TV was Mutoid Man. And I remember, John just went into his office and, he came back the next day and he had these sketches of this guy in a tank and actually wanted the guy floating a little bit at first.
Yeah.
Wanted him kind of flying around, and I was fearful of, how I'd make a big thing float and fly around, so I said, well, what about a tank tread,
Right.
And so that's kind of how we got into the business with Smash TV. Interesting thing about Smash TV is that it's very violent. The body chunks go flying in the air. The pools of blood that come out of the boss monsters. The boss monsters losing arms and screaming, and of course a couple of years after Mortal Kombat came, and there was the hoopla about violence in video games.
Actually, when we first got that going, we just watched that for days.
Right.
The blood pouring out of his neck.
Right.
I mean, it was like...
Well, I remember Eugene, one of the cool things about these early hardware platforms, for me, I had come from doing, the Atari VCS games where the entire game was 4K. It would only take maybe 6 weeks to do these games, but very limited horsepower. And when I got to Midway, Williams at the time, and the hardware that these guys had developed, sat in my office. I mean, the number of objects I could toss out and balls bouncing around, I mean, I was just overwhelmed by it. So when it came time to turn on, some body parts or some chunks, I mean, just turn on 2 of them. Well, that looks cool. Turn on 5 of them. Well, that looks cooler. I remember Eugene, the first time he saw the blood coming out of the boss monster, he said, that's $50 a week.
My favorite gratuitous piece of violence in Smash TV is the eyeball.
Oh, yeah.
When you step on that landmine, this incredibly, I mean, it's a total 3D rotation, coming in your face animation of an eyeball.
Yeah, sometimes more than one.
Yeah, sometimes more than one. And I mean, John, I still can't believe it, but John drew that by hand, pixel by pixel, from his head. Nothing was rendered. Nothing was, and it's growing in 3D, coming at your face. I mean, it's a total 3D effect.
We're talking about doing a Smash TV sequel. I mean, John came up with the idea of, okay, this game show and, these people competing, and it really still applies to today's marketplace, which is competitive head-to-head activity, in some kind of a creative world. I would love to do another dual joystick game. I mean, that would be so cool. And that's a great concept. Actually, there weren't a lot of waves. That was, doing a wave-based game. I remember coming in and, Eugene was thinking, well, I don't know, with, today's marketplace, you can get away with kind of a wave-based game. In fact, we argued about the free man icon. of course, the games at that time had started to transition over to buying in as you go. There had been some games prior that had, allowed buy-ins. Tempest, I think maybe was the first game that allowed that. But so Eugene and I argued because he thought, wow, this, I don't know if you should give away a free man. I mean, we're buying in, let him continue, and let him go, and which we have. So we have ended up giving away free men based on score, and you could pick up the icon. But we were a little concerned about a wave-based game, and of course, boss monsters would come in, and that kind of brought it, into the current day. But
yeah, it was. Yeah, I think we by adapting it to a buy-in format, and there's always that chemistry between how far can you screw the player, how much can you give the player, and how much can you screw him, and you're trying to get money out of the player, and so that there's that conflict there, and
sure.
I think so I think with the buy-in, and the other big thing was the boss monster format. So basically,
taking your money,
yeah.
That quality that I saw back then, it still stands out. A lot of times these days with a lot of the games, the newer games that we see come out in the arcades, they're interesting, but they're either they're beautiful games to look at, but the gameplay is real lousy. It's not an enjoyable experience. Or they've got some interesting gameplay things going there, but they don't pay attention to graphically what really makes a game look good and can help bring the player into the experience more. You don't see a whole lot of attention being paid to all of the parts of a good game all at the same time, as they used to in the old days when the discipline seemed to have been different. And so it's really easy for me to believe that there's this classic bring the old stuff back again kind of sentiment out there. The thing that's unfortunate about it is that the fellow who was in charge of that decision-making process, Noah Falstein, decided he was nervous that we'd get in a lot of trouble, too much trouble, for putting an Easter egg in. So he buried the thing so deep down that I can't even remember this complex series of things that you have to do to get it to show up. Guaranteed no one ever find it. The bug was a real cool one. When you play the game, as the Sinistar kills you and starts to kill you, you don't die right away. You sort of circle over the Sinistar's mouth, and then he chomps you, and then you're destroyed. It turns out that while you're in that configuration where you're spinning around in the mouth but not quite dead yet, and one of the warrior guys can come in and shoot you right then and kill you right then. And then the Sinistar kills you and you die twice, which it's really rare. It's extremely rare that it would happen, because most of the time the warriors, I believe in fact the warriors will not kill you when the Sinistar has you in its death grip already. But if one of their previous shots is still floating around in space, as they sometimes do, one of those can kill you. I think that's the way it works. And the really interesting, that was a bug, and that was a drag, because of course every once in a while consumers would lose 2 lives instead of just 1, which they really hated. The kids, those kids, found out that if you only had 1 life left and you got into that death grip where it was about to destroy you, and then the warrior shot came and killed you, the warrior shot would reduce your lives to 0, and then the Sinistar would kill you, which would reduce your number of lives left to -1. And in the computer world, -1 is also a really big number, and all of a sudden you'd have 255 lives left. And Lord knows how the kids would find these things, but I knew kids that could show me this in an arcade. They go up and say, look at this, and all of a sudden they have 255 lives, and man, you can play for a long time on Sinistar. You've got 255 ships left, boy.